pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you join me in a moment of silence, and especially in honor of Judge Jeffrey Paulson today. Thank you. You may be seated. The first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
I'll move that. Second.
Motion by Radig, second by Bittinger. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay, and the motion passes 5-0. The next item is the consent agenda. Items 2 through 6 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. These items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item number 2 is approval of the minutes of the April 18, 2023 meeting. Item 3 is approval of claims. Item 4 from Human Resources. A is approval of the memorandum of personnel transactions. Item B is the approval of retiree requests to remain on the health and dental insurance plans. Item 5 from Board Administration is the approval of a resolution thanking and commending Diana Christensen for her years of service with Woodbury County. Item 6 from Planning and Zoning is the approval to schedule May 9th at 4:45 p.m., May 16th at 4:45 p.m., and May 23rd at 4:45 p.m. for 3 public hearings for the consideration of proposed revisions to Woodbury County Ordinance Number 56. That is amendments to modify Section 6.1a, wind turbines setback requirements, to increase certain setback requirements to the ordinance regulating commercial wind energy conversion systems in unincorporated Woodbury County. This ends the consent agenda. Is there any discussion?
I'll move it. Second.
Motion by Radig, second by Nelson. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay, and the consent agenda passes 5-0. We have a little bit of time before our set time, which is a public hearing and sale of a property. We are going to skip down to committee meetings, if that's okay to go out of order. I understand that we are waiting also on an item from an elected official who will be here timely. Is that okay, Mr. Auditor? If we skip down, thank you. So report on committee meetings?
So we had CERTS with Simcoe. Of course, CERTS has been building that building out by the Iowa DOT for, well, at least the last year, and working with the federal government on a grant for multiple years. That is nearly complete. They're kind of, going through and doing the ceiling grid and, hanging all that. They have the rooftop unit that they were afraid they weren't going to have, but there's a delay in getting a generator. If the generator takes too long, the contractor will be renting one and giving them power so that it'll all still open on time and as scheduled. The building was sold, the existing Simcoe building. There's an agreement on that. I can't disclose anything else with that. And then, other than one little hiccup in the brick color, everything went quite smoothly as far as the construction of that building. So change orders, there was only like maybe one. I mean, it was clean from start to finish. So I'm sure when it's all done, they'll ask us to come and see them cut the ribbon. So
That's great. Please keep us apprised. We'd like to be there if possible. It's my dad drives for shirts and a tremendous asset to our community and something that our county participates in. So thank you for that. Any other committee meetings or updates? Gentlemen?
Oh, yeah, okay. Just had a SHIP meeting on Friday. SHIP won Best Nonprofit Organization at the BizX Conference in Nashville 2 weeks ago, excuse me. So congratulations to SHIP and all the work they do to help the lives here in Sioux City, especially youth and kids. And then second, the application for the juvenile diversion grant to help our juveniles not fall behind or get into more trouble. That's going through, so they're working at that, and I'm working with Sky Ranch with that, so everything's going well with that proceeding, so that's good. And then they had the 3rd Judicial District Mental Health Meeting, and nothing major report other than just working on streamlining responses and making sure those that are appearing before the judges regarding mental health issues or concerns are better served and followed up well. So
Great.
that's it.
Thank you for your work on that. Appreciate it.
I sat in this morning on a Sioux Line Initiative meeting. They talked about, obviously, the water treatment deal that Sioux City's working on, and then the little bit on the Sioux City Airport, and they had an entrepreneur panel of some entrepreneurs from in Sioux City that belong to kind of different diversity, ethnic groups, and I always appreciate hearing fellow entrepreneurs kind of talk about their story, how they got where they were. It was interesting to hear some of the struggles that some of these folks, some came to the U.S., et cetera. Tell them, talk about some of the hurdles they had to come over, but otherwise, that's all I had.
All right. Thank you very much. We will pick back up on any outstanding committee meetings, but we are at a 4:35 set time. This is a public hearing and sale of property parcel ending in 2005, also known as 1440 Glendale Boulevard. We are now in a public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak for or against the sale of this property? And we'll have folks who will come up and bid after that. This is just whether or not the property in question should be sold or not. So we are now in a public hearing if anyone would like to speak for or against the sale of this property. Hearing none, I move that the public hearing be closed.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no, and the motion passes 5-0. Anyone who would like to bid on this particular property can come forward at this time. And please state your name and address, as well as your bid.
Okay, my name's Donna Jigaroa, and I live at 1442 Glendale Boulevard here in Sioux City. And what was the other question? I'm sorry.
Just what you would like your minimum bid to be.
$50.
$50. Is there anyone else who would like to bid on the sale of this property? Hearing no one else, I move that the property be sold to Ms. Jigaroa.
Yes.
If I can get a second.
I'll second that.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay, and the motion passes 5-0.
Okay.
And Heather will help you out the
All right,
back.
thank you.
Thank you. Just finishing up to make it clean on item 10, are there any other reports on committee meetings, either from here or afar? Hearing none, I'll just let you know that Supervisor Nelson and myself plan to meet with the Building Services Director, Kenny Schmitz, and our Emergency Services Director, Scott Mitchell. In about 2 weeks' time, we're going to meet on site in Climbing Hill and talk about the future of that building, schematics, funding, and what we can possibly do short of a bond issue in order to either build new, do some sort of hybrid, repurpose, or otherwise use that building. So look forward to that discussion in 2 to 3 weeks. And also just wanted to congratulate on Dr. Mosley as president of Morningside University. Had the honor to be there and sing in the Martin Luther King Jr. Choir. And it was an incredible event, and the future is certainly bright under his leadership there. Any other committee meetings? Hearing none, I'll once again ask the auditor if it's okay, if we can go a little out of order. Thank you. I see the thumbs up. We're going to move to item 9, which is the Board of Supervisors, Jeremy Taylor and Mark Nelson. This is information related to a public records request, subcontractors on the Justice Center project, and access under the Law Enforcement Center Authority. So last week, during citizen concerns, the request was made by a citizen, Mr. Ernie Colt, asking for a subcontractors list. The information was provided by the Law Enforcement Center Authority and working with the county attorney's office. We are providing a complete list of subcontractors today. That is in the agenda packet. Any member of the media or citizen otherwise can see that. That was provided also electronically to Mr. Colt. Also, in terms of background, to the knowledge of the county and its building services director, Hausman Construction has been completing the tasks necessary to ensure quality assurance questions numbers 21 and 23 and compliance related to specifications, labor laws, compensation, tax, or employee payroll documentation has been met. And to the knowledge of the county and its building services director, Hausman Construction has updated monthly the contractor affidavits. Contractors and subcontractors have provided documentation and affidavits supporting documentation to the county's building services director in accordance with quality assurance items numbers 20 through 24. We also include that portion of the quality assurance survey that was in question during citizens' concerns. Visiting the Justice Center project is under the auspices and the authority of the Law Enforcement Center in conjunction with Hausman Construction. It's something that neither the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors nor the City Council of the City of Sioux City controls as to who has access to that site. Again, that's under the Law Enforcement Center Authority. With that said, it's an active construction site with serious present and future security concerns, which is understandable from the county's perspective, but we would encourage the Law Enforcement Center Authority to relook at its policy, whether it's advisable for citizens to be able to access the site during construction or not, as it purports that certain measures need to be met and then access may be granted. And clearly, that access hasn't been granted to any citizen so far, nor to any supervisor that I'm aware of. And so if that's going to be put out there as this is what you need to do, I think that there should just be some clarity in the policy. If they're not allowing citizens for those reasons, then just state as much rather than saying this is what needs to be done in order to be able to come out here. So, do you have anything that you'd like to?
I would just like to add too that, you know, there were some comments that were made that we were, that the LEC or perhaps the supervisors were stonewalling. We weren't providing the information, at least on a timely basis if it was requested. And I just wanted people to know that after the meeting last week, in my car on the way home, I called Ron Wick and I said, you know, as supervisors, we would like to see a list of these subcontractors. He said, not a problem. I'll talk to Hausman Construction in the morning. Hopefully have it to you by the end of the day. He texted me at 11 o'clock on Wednesday morning and said, got the list. It'll be in your inboxes shortly. And I think it was about 15 minutes later that it was. So there was no problem with getting us the information. It moved very fast. I guess we don't have anything to hide. The LEC doesn't have anything to hide. And but I believe that this is the right of the citizens to ask these questions, to ask for this information, and so we're happy to oblige that. But yeah, and I did ask Ron, there have been no citizens that have been granted access to tour the jail, their work site, unless they've been, or no citizens, period. The only people that have been out there are people associated with the project or the sheriff's office in some regard. So Supervisor Taylor said maybe they should look at that policy because it maybe is a little disingenuous, but they have not allowed any citizens to visit it, so.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion?
I mean,
Mr. Chair.
well, one second there, Matthew. I was just gonna say that, you know, in general, how many construction sites or anybody from the general public ever allowed on? You know, so it makes sense that you wouldn't have any access. unless it was a guided tour or some kind of thing where you were invited only.
Supervisor Ong?
Yes, I would just agree with your comments earlier on no need for citizens in general. I think the media days have been helpful, useful, and go above and beyond when the LEC Authority hosts those and provides drone footage, pictures, interviews. I think they've gone out of their way to show the progress to the public, and that's why the concerns have not come that we're talking about today have not come from the media, because there are no specific concerns that we're aware of. Also, I just wanted to mention, I reviewed a city council meeting recording from a couple weeks ago, and I was disheartened, as I know our building services director was, that his name, Kenny Schmitz's name, was brought up as one of those parties that is, quote, stonewalling. And that's definitely not a fair characterization of our building services director. And as Mr. Nelson pointed out, he received his information 15 minutes after asking for it, and I'm not aware of any other request that he's not responded to. And in fact, he told me that he's never been directly asked for that list in particular. So I just wanted to clear that up for the public and make that clear.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we're now going to move to our next item on the agenda, which is item number 8 from our county attorney, James Loomis. This is the approval to direct the Human Resources Director to prepare a memorandum of understanding for the $2,000 bonus payments to the administrative staff totaling $16,000 to come out of the fine collections from the county attorney's office. Mr. County Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you gentlemen again tonight. Essentially, everyone except Mr. Nelson was here earlier in the year, and I had an opportunity at that point in time to essentially explain the situation that was going on with our office in an effort to simply find applicants for the attorney positions and the shortage that we were facing. And as this board knows, they were very gracious to me during that period of time and did a lot in my efforts, and those efforts are paying off. We still remain short attorneys in our office, but I do believe that we're making progress. What you might not know at that point in time, and what still continues to this day, is that the support staff in my office has gone above and beyond anything that is asked of them to do. There is a lot of work that they have done that they don't normally have to do, and that they've taken it on without complaint. I've not heard one complaint from anyone on the support staff. And we're going on, it's safe to say 6-7 months now, dating back to last year, where it was really starting to require of them extra work. And that extra work, like I said, was taken on by them without complaint. And when I came to this board, my focus was on the attorneys, and I am here tonight to focus on what I believe is their deserving reward. A person is deserving of their efforts, and my effort here tonight is to reward them for their efforts and their hard work in my office. And my effort to do this is not to paint a brush that would treat, or other folks in the county would treat as unfair. That is not my effort. But my concern and my focus is on those that I'm responsible for and ensuring that their work is rewarded. And so my request tonight is pretty straightforward, and it's laid out in the agenda item. My request is to use fine collection money that I have discretion over, that is generated from the administrative staff. And that money goes into an account in our office that we're permitted to use at our discretion for many things. And the request is not something that comes out of any budget item. It's not a request of additional money from this board. My request is simply that the board grant approval in the interest of transparency and being upfront with both the board and the citizens of Woodbury County. And my request is that I'm asking this board to allow and direct HR to draft a memorandum of understanding that would allow monies to come from that fines and collections account within our office totaling $16,000. There are 8 people in the administrative staff of my office, and I believe that they're deserving of what I consider a bonus. I don't really know how else to describe it, but it's essentially to reward them for all of their hard work and all of their efforts that they have made. And so I believe that it is appropriate for me to use that money in that fashion. It's a discretion that I'm taking out of respect for this process, what the board has to consider. And I understand that the board has to consider a lot of variables, and they've done so with a lot of different items thus far this year, both with bonuses in the county attorney's offices, bonuses to other employees in Woodbury County. And so I'm not blind to that fact. I'm not blind to the fact that this board has to consider other things. But I want you to know that I'm respectfully coming to you because of what my focus is. And my focus is not necessarily the same as your focus. Your picture is obviously bigger than my picture. I get that, and I'm respectful of that. But my focus is to make sure that my employees that work directly under me are taken care of. And I believe that it is appropriate to use this money in this fashion, not just because, to a large extent, they're the ones that are generating this money. But like I said, it's because really they're deserving of this. And, I could individually point out what each of them does in our office. I don't think that that's necessary. I just think that I am here to be very complimentary of what they've done and to advise the board of that. And they're going to continue to do the extra work because we continue to be short on that side. Now, like I said, we're making progress, but that work that they're going to be required to do is going to have to continue simply because of where we are right now. And so that's why I'm here tonight. It's simply to put them in the forefront and to reward them for what they've done. And so, I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that they might have or that you might have for me regarding it, but that's really as simple as that. That's kind of where I am and why I'm here tonight to make that request. But I'd be happy to address any comments, questions, concerns that this board might have regarding what I'm asking for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there discussion?
First concern I want to bring up is the precedent that we're setting then from one department to another now, anyone that has fine collections or discretionary funds to then request bonuses that the board would have to approve ultimately because we determined that. But I guess, do you have any comment in regard to that? Because I don't know that this has been done in Woodbury County ever before with fine collection funds.
No, it hasn't been done before. But again, what I'm trying to do is find a way to reward what is hard work and extra work being done by the folks in my office. In terms of a precedent, I'm not intending to do this on a regular basis, and it's not something that, I understand where your concern is, Mr. Raddick, and like I said, the concerns of the board are sometimes different than the concerns that I have. And your picture is different than my picture. I recognize and understand that, but what I think is important is to reward them, and that's where my focus is, because I also have to make decisions within my office that keep the employees that are working under me happy. And and
I guess
rewarding them
I'm not
for-
disagreeing with any of that, you know, it's just more or less, you know, you may not come back here every year asking for bonuses, but then what if another department does decide, okay, well, the attorney did this, now we're gonna do this, and then what if this becomes an every year?
Well, then that's something that the board has to address, and the reasons why someone is doing that. You know, reasons can vary, but this is discretionary money that is within our office, it's within my discretion to use, and I'm choosing to use it in this fashion. And, you know, again, whether it becomes something that,
How much would you say is in this fund source that you have discretion on at this point?
I believe it's around $160,000 right now.
Out of curiosity, would somebody that's doing work in the juvenile courtroom over in Trosper Hoyt be eligible as somebody that could benefit from a bonus here as well?
What do you mean by that, Mr. Reddick?
We have, from what I understand, 5 maintenance individuals that have been doing extra work outside their duties that have not been compensated in any way, shape, or form as well. Doing certain repairs over to the juvenile court side that I would hate to see not be included.
Well, they're not part of my office, Mr. Reddick.
I
My focus
get
is
that,
on
but-
those in my office.
But they also are doing work in a legal front for the county essentially, so.
That's true, but they're not in my office, and my focus is on the folks in my office.
And that's why I'm saying you're not specifically going to ask for those employees because they're not yours.
Right.
Right, and I'm not disagreeing with that, but I just know that there's somebody else doing work outside of the norm, and I guess juvenile court wouldn't necessarily be your department either, but I don't know if you have attorneys that work in there, or,
We do have 2 support staff that are in the juvenile division. They are part of my request here. They are part of that 8 that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I echo Keith. I mean, that's my concern too. I do applaud you, James, for taking care of your employees. And I agree. I think for all of us up here, we understand that your office and the support staff, they do a great job and are working hard. So I don't think it's a question, you know, of deservement, right? I know a lot of our employees and are going above and beyond. I agree with Keith. Even, you know, over in building services are working hard. So we say thank you to you and thank you to them as well. But I do agree with the fines collection. Not that you're trying to set a precedent, but just I think from our side, it could look like a precedent's being set. Not that you're trying to do that. So hear me out. I know you're not trying to do that. But I think that's one concern. Another question I want to clarify, Chair, if you the employees in question, they've already received a $1,000 bonus for the fiscal year 23. Is that correct? Or no?
That was my understanding.
Is that? And then and then in fiscal year 24, another bonus is coming online of 1,000, correct? I want to make sure I have my notes correct.
Right, and speaking with our budget analyst and HR director, that was my understanding as well.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, that's all I have in response.
Yeah, I know bonuses are being given out, and so
But that's different money, Mr. Bittinger, with all due respect.
It is,
The
right.
money that you're referring to is money that was part of ARPA funds that you
Right.
have direct control over.
Right.
You know, this is different. You know, this is coming from a different revenue source.
true.
And so it's not costing the taxpayers of Woodbury County anything.
Right.
It's not coming out of any budgetary item that I came to before earlier during the budgetary process. And so respectfully, those monies and the money that I'm referring to is part of the county attorney and what we use. And respectfully, I believe that I should be allowed to use that in a way that I deem appropriate. And so, again, I come here respectfully, but
Yeah.
that's different money.
Right.
Those bonuses that you're referring to, that's different money. And so I don't think that it's necessarily apples to apples when you're making that comparison. I think that you're making a comparison between different things because you're talking about how something impacts directly a taxpayer versus how this doesn't directly impact a taxpayer. I get it, You guys have a different perspective on certain issues that you have to take into account that I don't. But I don't necessarily agree that this is some kind of apples to apples comparison that is being made between the bonuses that have previously been given and what I'm seeking to do here.
Right. Right, it is different money, I agree, right. This wouldn't necessarily affect the bottom line or the taxpayer directly. I agree with that. I think the concern is just the precedent and also the potential yes, it is your budget. I agree with that, right? Your discretionary funds, but the board is charged within the code to oversee all type of payroll, all the payroll, extra help, payout, technically bonuses, and it's our job to negotiate with the unions and contracts. And to create an MOU, it just seems like, once again, this could be circumventing the process, not with any type of ill intent, but just if it's our job in the code to negotiate the contracts and pay and extra bonuses, then I think bonuses have been given out. Not saying they're not deserving. So I want to be very clear. I hope you hear my heart, and I think where
I understand that,
stand.
Mr.
Right,
Bittinger.
yeah. So that's my concern there. That not saying you or any elected official, but what could happen down the road, and not saying anyone would do this, and of course, I'm not saying you would do this, but what would stop the petition for greater bonuses, 5,000, 10,000, 15, 20,000. I'm not saying you're doing that, or any elected officials would do that. That's just my concern, is that where do we stop when I think good effort has been made to give bonuses and to try to make sure that we show appreciation to all of our county workers, which are working hard. So that's just where I'm coming from.
Sure.
But I appreciate you standing up for your employees too. So, but yeah, that's all I have. at the moment.
Other discussion? Mr. Auditor.
Chair.
Supervisor Ong.
Yeah, on Mr. Bittinger's comment, I think we can all agree that other elected officials would do that. How limited could or would this MOU be to these 8 employees?
How do you mean that specifically, Mr. On? Do you mean how often would this happen, or?
No, I mean, as far as the union on the MOU, are the 8 members all 8 members? Are we going to be subject to a grievance from another union member connected to your office if they're not included? Things like that.
It includes all 8 support staff, one of which is the office manager, who is not part of the union. I don't know if the other 7 are actual members of the union or not.
Melissa isn't there, is she?
She is.
She is.
Oh. Would we be able to get a more detailed answer from her, Mr. Chair?
Sure, she's approaching the podium at this time.
Melissa Thomas, Human Resources Director, and there are other clerical staff within that ASME union. If you would approve the MOU today, or to direct me to write the MOU, I would have to exclude the rest of the members of the union.
You're saying, just to put a finer point on it, you're saying there's other members of clerical staff outside of the county attorney's office that are part of the ASME collective bargaining unit?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly, yep.
Okay.
And the Building Services Department is also part of the ASME courthouse agreement.
Melissa, is there any other way to accomplish this?
I was advised by the county attorney during the last request for bonus that it needed to be an MOU onto the county attorney's contract. So I really don't know another way.
Supervisor Young, further discussion, questions?
Well, this is tough because this office has been down a third of the staff, which is not something we can, of the professional prosecution staff, which is not something we can say of other groups. But in related to the concerns already raised, if this was to be approved, in my mind, the board would have to signal today, this is the only one. We've spoken about setting precedents and we've spoken about drawing a line, but we've never actually drawn a line on the 4% retention payments, no matter whether they come from retention funds, recruitment funds, and ARPA. This is going to create requests from every other office and department, and that's a guarantee. I mean, there's things we don't know that others haven't brought forward, and I was hoping Melissa would say there'd be another way, but if this is the will of the board, then this has to be the only one, and this cannot come back. We are exposing ourselves to a lot of potential demands on MOUs, and the entire collective bargaining process is beginning to just erode with this inflation and with the different things the board has done to try and compensate outside of the agreements.
Thank you. Mr. Auditor?
Yes, I don't know if I should ask this question of you or Luan. This is similar to what we've discussed before. Last year we had an issue, or was it last year, with the sheriff? And what that boiled down to, this issue has been out there for a long time, but it has to do with an independent elected official and their budget, and why the board can deny a claim from an independent elected official. It has to be unlawful, is what I remember that those discussions had been, is that the board has greater latitude over most decisions, but when it comes to an elected official and the money that's in their budget, especially with this type of money that I'm unfamiliar with, this pot of money that comes back to the county attorney's office. Have you considered that, or has that been part of the discussion?
Well, I'd like to draw a distinction there, Mr. Gill, in the fact that, as I recall, what that situation dealt with was money that was part of the budget. That's different, okay, because this money is not part of the budget. That money that Sheriff was referring to, as I understand it, dealt with money that was part of his budget that he had remaining that he wanted to use to pay certain deputies within his department. This is not part of any of the budget. This is completely separate. And so I just want to draw that distinction that I don't think that that's the right comparison, because I don't think that they're the same issue. I believe that they're different, considerably different, when you understand that it's the money that I'm referring to has nothing to do with with the budget at all.
That issue, when it was talked about last time, I agree with you that this is different money. But even then, the consideration was whether the elected official, with money that was appropriated to them in their budget, could use that money as they see fit, and that was a disagreement between the board and the elected official. And what it boiled down to was the assistant county attorney asked me if I would issue a claim if the board denied that, and I don't believe I can issue a claim if the board denies it. That's the way that was decided last time. And so, but it was, it wasn't agreed to by both parties. But that's what it came down to last time. But so that's what I'm asking for a clarification here, because I am an elected official. And I'm concerned, I've always been concerned about the ability to use my budget as I see fit to carry out the duties of my office, as long as they were lawful. So that's why I was asking the question.
Again, I just think that that was a statutory interpretation of that particular issue. And, you know, to me, as I view it, I'm asking the board, and if they deny it, they deny it. I'm not here to cause problems. I'm not here to do any of those kinds of things. If it gets denied, I'm not seeking any kind of end around or anything of that sort. I'm just not, I don't operate that way. You know, I operate as I'm up front. And I might be blunt at times, but I'm up front. And I don't intend to do anything. You know, I'm not asking them to do, I'm not asking for a statutory interpretation. I'm not getting into that tonight. This is just a request I'm making. And I think that situation, and I know that you understand this, Mr. Gill, is different. And so I'm trying to avoid going down that path with this because I think that it's not the same.
Well, I guess as a supervisor, I see these as different scenarios. And I don't know, I'm not speaking for you guys, but I'm thinking they probably do too. The challenge from our position is, you know, you're trying to do what's right and fair for these individuals in your office. But then we as supervisors have quite a few employees throughout the county that, now how are we fair for anybody else that's had to do above and beyond this last year or do more or was requested to do more? And like, you know, for me, I'd see those guys in building services that were doing all that work in Trosper Hoyt, you know, I'd love to see them taken care of too. But the challenge from our position is that every time we do something right for somebody, we're insensitive for not doing something for everybody. So there's a real challenge with that from my perspective.
And I understand and appreciate that perspective, Mr. Raddick. I do.
If I can
Have a
weigh in, I'll get back to you in just a moment, Supervisor Ong. So if I can weigh in, I am enormously supportive and respectful of both of the perspectives of these elected officials that just spoke. Our county attorney, who's looking out for his people and sees day to day what they're doing, and have an enormous amount of appreciation, not only for the request, but the way the request has been made. So I appreciate that very much. In the same vein with what Supervisor Raddick said, I've already heard talk of what about the other 40-some-odd people in the same collective bargaining unit. So that alludes to what our county attorney said. We have a bigger picture in looking at those problems and those unintended consequences. And so that's my concern, is from an equity standpoint. The others who are working hard in other areas and going above and beyond, we don't have that same ability. And in a single collective bargaining unit, that becomes a very difficult challenge then. I think what is clear, not relitigating from the past, but is this board needs to approve a memorandum of understanding if that compensation is to be paid out, because the contract exists between the Board of Supervisors and that collectively bargained for unit. So I'm not supportive at this time, but I have an enormous amount of appreciation for you asking and for the respectful discussion tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Tanner.
Sir, further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Ong.
Yes, so it is obviously a two-step process. We would decide to draft, and then the second step is the union would agree to sign. Is there any indication that the ASME union would even sign an MOU that excludes members? Do we have any indication of that?
They did not get back to me, Mr. Hahn. I reached out to them through the
You reached out
HR
to them and
director.
they didn't get back to you.
I have not heard back, so I moved forward. I've got things to do, and I don't have time to wait
Right.
for that. So I apologize. I don't have an answer for that. I reached out and didn't hear back, and I've got to move forward. Like I said, I've got things to do.
Yeah, I can understand that. That's that's obviously the linchpin on this is that question. Typically, the board has moved forward when we have understood that to be an option on the table, but I don't know if we even know that. It would be unfortunate to go through the slings and arrows only to have the MOU be denied on the grounds that it excludes members.
I understand that, Mr. Dunn. Thank you.
Supervisor Nelson.
As a conservative, I can appreciate the thought process here of, okay, we get these fines and these penalties, that we have this discretionary account. So it's not on the burden of the taxpayers. We've gotten this from people that have broken the law or had a citation or whatever, so we could take that money and give it to these people. And I can appreciate that process, that thought process behind that. And as a farmer, I truly believe full day's work, full day's wage. And so I can appreciate if someone has been going above and beyond, asking for more, and I've got no problems there. My concern is that if this excuse me, discretionary spending account or the money that you have was to be used for something like this, in general, for any department, you probably wouldn't be here discussing it with us today. And this is kind of like a first time that we're potentially setting a precedent that we're doing that. And that's my concern, is that will this lead to other departments trying to use this account for the same thing? And on top of that, public perception, I think, when you look at, and I'm not a criminal, so I don't pay fines, but they could look at it and say, oh, well, the attorney's office is really, they're really out there trying to collect fines and penalties because they can give themselves bonuses out of that account. And obviously, you guys have to prosecute these people and uphold the law, and it's a tough job, but we have to do it with the highest level of integrity. And I think that that's maybe why we don't use this discretionary spending in ways of paying people out of it, because then it could look like we're trying to feather our nests by actively looking for people to penalize. So in that regard, I'm not as in favor versus if it were to come from the board. But I guess that's my concerns. I appreciate the staff for the work that they've done, and I know you've been in a hole, and that's, it's unfortunate, but those are my concerns involving the discretionary spending. So.
I have a quick question for Melissa.
Yes, Supervisor.
If these clerical employees were not in a union, how difficult would it be for the board to simply bonus them?
I don't know that answer. I would say if they were a wage plan, then a motion for the bonus would be sufficient.
Thank you. It's obviously a difficulty to have unions that span several offices. It is much easier for the board to be fair when there's a elected official approaching for their office, but I don't know the answer to that. I mean, when there's good economic times, it seems best for the members to have as many groups as they possibly can. But when there's all this economic disruption, it makes it challenging for the board in ways that other counties wouldn't deal with.
I have a challenge with this one. I actually empathize with the request. The challenge I have had, is, of course, the challenge that we faced is that when we didn't do something for everybody, then we were the bad guys, and to me, this is something I think I could support. I would want to know the union's response. I would not want to exclude, and I know it's not your department, but they're doing work for your department, the 5 maintenance people that have been doing the work in the Trosper Hoyt for the juvenile court. But like I said, I would like to hear what the union has to say, and I am struggling still with the precedent side of it. So, I mean, if, it's on his action, and I know you're trying to get it done because your time is valued. But, you know, with a little more discussion, I guess, as a board, which of course only happens here, open session, it's not something I'm gonna support tonight, so.
Thank you, Mr. Raddick.
Any other discussion? Treasurer Bertrand?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Tina Bertrand, Woodbury County Treasurer. I absolutely can appreciate what County Attorney Loomis is trying to do for his office. I think as an elected official, it's something that we keep at the forefront of our minds. We are the ones that are closest to what's going on in each individual office and what our staffing needs are and the demands on each individual employee. I would share some same concerns that Auditor Gill has brought up. This was an issue that was brought up last year with Sheriff Sheehan, and he was denied. Discretionary income in terms of what that means for individual offices and who actually has discretionary income. I think the treasurer's office could say the same thing, that we do have some funds in our accounts, some revenue streams that we have that are really to the treasurer's office, not necessarily going back to the county as a whole. And I know that having the autonomy of our office is important to be able to manage our offices the way they need to be managed. So I think it's always good to have a respectful conversation, but we do have to have some things kind of at the forefront in terms of what kind of precedence is set. And we can argue about funding sources and certain funding streams. Then we get into denying another elected official the potential of being able to do a similar action. So not to pick on Supervisor Ong, particularly since he's not physically present today, but I know that he just recently made the statement that he would like to kind of stop it in the tracks of other officials, and I'm not sure that that is fair either. That if it were the county treasurer's office that had a similar situation, because we do also run short on staff. We've had a fair amount of turnover over the last year or so as well, and have had other staff members have to take on other duties as a result of some of that. And if it were something that I was coming forward with, I'd be a little upset if I was told no because James was told yes and we were going to stop it in the tracks because of it sets precedence. I think we need to also focus on the fact that we are elected equally as the Board of Supervisors and that we do have an autonomy of our office and that we should be allowed to manage our budgets the way we need to manage them to effectively serve the community in our own capacities. Because we each have our own capacities to serve our communities. And I just want to make sure that some of those things are kept in mind and at the forefront as well. I know this is a difficult decision to make. I understand all too well how some staff can feel that they're overworked and underappreciated and wish we could do more for them. And I can absolutely appreciate that County Attorney Loomis is coming forward trying to fight on behalf of his staff members, but also recognize the hard work that they do for his office that helps to keep a safe community for us. That's all I wanted to say, so thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ong, Supervisor Ong.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond by saying there's no offense taken. Treasurer Bertrand's just reiterating the board's overall concern in a different way. And that's basically that even one MOU isn't enough unless it's coordinated with every single union rep at the same time.
Well, thank everyone for the discussion. If there is nothing further, I would either entertain a motion, or if there's a lack of one, then it will die for lack of a motion.
If I can
Supervisor
comment-
Rittinger?
Well, I just want to comment with the treasurer. Thank you for that, Tina. I agree, you're right. If the elected official has the right to run their own budget, I agree with that. But going off, if I heard you right, you're saying, right, even with discretionary funds, I think I heard you right, saying you should be able to spend that as you like it. Is that correct, or am I hearing that correctly? I have a point to make. I just want to make sure. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Go ahead.
Well, I guess some of it, and maybe I misinterpreted a few comments here between Auditor Gill and County Attorney Loomis, which was last year when it came about with the Sheriff's Department, that part of the reason why it was deemed either inappropriate or unlawful or whatever the end result was, ultimately it was denied. And that part of the reason or the difference, I guess, this evening is because of the types of funds that are being used. And from a broad perspective, I have a budget for my office, regardless of what types of funds they are. We collect money in our office for parking tickets and other things too that we get a discretionary income. We have motor vehicle services, which is a funding stream that is, for the services that we provide to our community, not necessarily just the property tax revenue that we bring in. So, we can split hairs over the types of funds that are allocated to each department. And how does that relate or correlate to how we spend on the expense side when we have a cohesive budget? And I guess part of what I was hearing was that last year's situation was the funds that Sheriff Sheehan, and I apologize because he's not here this evening to, clarify for himself, was that those funds were a different type of funding stream, and therefore that's the differentiator that why he can be denied the ability to take care of the staffing needs in his department because of funding stream, and that the county attorney's office, because it's somewhat discretionary, can be able to utilize those funds. Where the overarching is we have a budget that we should be able to utilize in the fashion that we need, that we see fit as duly elected officials. Once the board has approved those budgets, it's ours to use to implement. There can be some things that we may need to come back and talk and discuss for transparency purposes, which I absolutely believe that's what County Attorney Loomis is trying to do. I think Sheriff Sheehan tried to do the same thing. I would like to think that if I was in the same position that I would be doing the same thing. My concern comes with, we want to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, we're going to say yes today. And to think that that situation is never going to happen again in another department would be short-sighted. It absolutely can happen again. And part of it is where is our autonomy as elected officials? Where is our autonomy to be able to manage the department the way we need to, and still be respectful of all of our roles? We have a check and balance system, right?
And respectfully, I think one of the check and balances is that for the purposes of compensation, Iowa code is pretty clear that compensation must come through the Board of Supervisors. And even today, I think it's a perfect example. Here's our county attorney who recognizes he has discretion over those funds. That's very clear. But because the contract is held between the Board of Supervisors and the collectively bargained for unit, there's no way to pay those individuals but for an MOU. And so I think that's the balance. And I'm appreciative of revisiting some of the things from the past and holding those checks and balances. But I think for tonight, I'm not hearing, unless there's a forthcoming motion, that that's something that will move forward tonight unless somebody makes a motion otherwise.
Right. Well, my point I want to get to is I agree, but it just seems right. If you could spend it, but it still has to come before the board, it's still, there's still the two in the tango that have to dance to get the MOU done. And it's not sole autonomy, not in the sense of you can just spend it wherever, but I agree with your point. I understand what you're saying. It's just, I'm trying to work through it my first year, understand all, use the analogy of the tango of just, there is a dance between the elected officials and the Board of Supervisors, for this, from what I read in the code, but, so I would, right tonight, I would need, I need to think through this more and understand it better before I would probably give my approval. Notwithstanding, I want to make it very clear, you know, with James, and your staff, you guys are doing a great job, working hard, and so this is not because they don't deserve it, or they're being, not doing the job well done. It's just, I've got, I think, more of a principle. I need to get some more understanding of this and think about this some more before I would probably give approval.
I say move on.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you. Moving on to item number 11, which is citizen concerns. Good evening.
Hi, Deborah Main, 1026 Charles Avenue. Wouldn't be a meeting without pipeline stuff, would it? A couple of things have happened in recent days. The governor signed the Restructuring Act, so the Office of the Consumer Advocate is no longer an independent office. Jennifer Eisler is replaced by Lanny, I think it's pronounced Zeman, and that is no longer a term of service, but an at-will appointment and employment by the Attorney General. So some of the independence there is lost a little bit, and the control is now in the Attorney General's office. With iUtilities Board, Richard Lozier's term is expired. Josh Burns will remain on the board. Jerry Huser was the chair. Governor Reynolds appointed Eric Hilland as the chair of the IUB, and Jerry Huser resigned. So they have two new appointments on the iUtilities Board. I don't know how these people are going to get caught up with all this after 2 years of this under the bridge, but Sarah Martz has been appointed to the iUtilities Board. She is an engineer, and she's had utility experience with the military, and so her appointment passed 50-0. The other appointment is, I had his name down here, Eric Helland. His appointment wasn't passed with unanimously. They kind of questioned his qualifications, but he was appointed to a couple boards before and not passed, and then the governor appointed him as interim appointment, so he actually got on the board afterwards. There was a ruling from PHMSA, and this is reference the Sartasia rupture in Mississippi. They issued a consent order and agreement. They acknowledged three things, major things that happened with that. Failure to mitigate geohazards, which that means the shifting soil and that sort of thing. Inadequate dispersion models. They used a dispersion model that was referenced to water, and that acts very differently than CO2. And inadequate communication to first responders before and after the rupture. So Denbury did not have to admit any wrongdoing in this situation. So that kind of leaves their victims and any lawsuits out in the cold.
Got about 30 seconds.
Denbury reduced their 4.8 million fine to 2.8 million. And if you look at Denbury's net worth, that's 0.006% of their net worth, and they will be writing that off on taxes. So just some information on that point. I would hate to see us treated in the same way.
Thank you very much. Any other citizen concerns who would like to, or citizens who would like to address the board with concerns tonight? Good evening.
Good evening. Gail Palmquist from Lawton. I believe it was 2 weeks ago when we talked about having an intervention and seeing what we could do as a legal system. Just wondering if we've had any reports on that.
Yep, so thank you very much. I was actually going to address that under board
Oh,
concerns.
good.
So we'll move to item 12, which is board concerns. In consultation with our county attorney's office, we are looking at potential legal options and the advisement of the board per our request from a couple of weeks ago. As you heard tonight, and as you've probably seen in the news, our county attorney's office has not been looking for things just to do, and so has been tasked and overworked is an understatement. However, those conversations are being had, and we are looking sometime in the next week or two, we're hoping to sit down and be apprised of what some of those options are. So I know that's not a specific report, but I am assuring you that we are having some of those conversations with our county attorney's office and looking for a response as they have been in and out of trial, as you've seen lately. So I would expect within the next week or two that this board with advisement will move forward on doing something. And that's not just lip service to that. I think you've seen an interest on behalf of this board in moving the ball downfield on this issue. So, any other board concerns for tonight? Hearing none, we stand adjourned.